Hi, and welcome to this live reading from City of Whispers, Imperial Assassin Series Book 1 by Katt Powers, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Spring 1493, Jirian Calendar, Izurum, Talmacan Region, Imperial Colony of Tizrak Yurda. No one expected a group of figures to burst out from the temple's bone-white walls, revolvers in hand, shiny new pieces, gunmetal gray, oiled and glistening. After all, no one expected to die at a wedding. Certainly not the priest, suddenly standing cheek to jowl with two black-clad, pistol-wielding men, nor his attendant as he was thrown head-first down the steps. More men streamed out from the temple's cloying darkness, others stormed in through the compound gates. The priest's mouth opened in a horrified, round-lipped gasp. For a gut-squeezing moment, Donnie Karim stared through the heat shimmer, watching the scene unfold. The band stopped playing. The fiddler's cheeks paled. A long way away, like a voice calling out across a field, her mind added the words "nationalist cult" to "wedding" and came up with "massacre." Then the shooting began. Wedding guests scattered from under the marquee, cried out, and fell. Chairs flew sideways, a platter piled with naan and a jug of wine wobbled and shattered on the ground. Beyond the dribbling fountain, Fikret grabbed Esmail and scanned the crowd for little Rivik. His shoulders sagged in anguish. The child was nowhere to be found. A woman shrieked the national cult's name and then, "Run!" After that, the hiss and sizzle of people hurling the killing flame at their attackers turned the afternoon fiery red. A bullet smashed into the wooden arbor of hand's breadth from Danny's ear. Splinters and crimson bougainvillea stung her cheek. Blood blistered on her skin. A bolt of scarlet flame scorched the air just meters away, close enough it tugged at her solar plexus. Her knuckles popped as she reefed a blade from its holster. Now would have been a good time to develop the ability to hurl Dinja or some other kind of magic. Creator above! She'd settle for tossing sparkly pink fairies if it gave her an advantage. She stole a glance at her olive copper skin. Nope, not gonna happen. Still a Jirian homelander, still mute to the flames. Blades and batons would have to do. She crouched low and ran, retracing her steps beneath the bougainvillea-covered walkway. A bullet whizzed past. A man screamed and cried out to the gods. Burned hair and charred skin choked her nose, making her gag. Sweat stung her bleeding cheek. At the end of the walkway, she made a hard right, angling for the temple's western steps. A desperate flanking move, sure, but one that might just save lives. Especially if she could get her hands on a gun. On the temple balcony, the priest had somehow fallen over. His ample form lay prostrate on the tiles, his legs pedaling frantic circles in the air. Slowly, somewhere around the speed of waterlogged continental drift, he rolled onto his belly and began to elbow his bulk toward the temple's main chamber. As people scattered, an old man and a small boy, both wedding guests, stumbled and fell, blocking her path to the temple steps. A ginger cat tumbled out of the child's arms and onto the dirt. It froze, arching its back and hissing. A hooded man rushed in to cut off the pair's escape, wielding a pistol. Danny skidded to a halt. Time could have slowed if the creator, Father Ulgan, Mother Ymir, heck, even a long-forgotten one-eyed tortoise god with foot fungus, had even the slightest sense of compassion. Time didn't slow. It zeroed in for a direct collision delivered to the gut with a bull camel's kick. The hooded man wheeled, aiming the pistol at the old man's head. The small boy bounced to his feet, screaming for his great-grandfather and Selti, a common name for Tizraki cats, to run. Tears glistened on the child's pale, dirt-streaked face. His bright blue tunic had a rent down the center, exposing a grazed belly. Danny unclipped her steel baton, testing its weight in her hand. Adrenaline flooded her mouth with a sharp metal tang. Behind the mask, the gunman's eyes bulged like fearful saucers. He gripped the gun with both hands, its muzzle cutting a shaky arc from the old man to the boy to the spitting ginger cat. Danny took aim. Maybe the gods cared after all. Either that, or the gunman's trembling muzzle said he feared their judgment in the afterlife. "Please don't," the old man begged, trying to rise on trembling arms. His great-grandson cowered, now wailing for his mother. Shots popped off on the other side of the temple courtyard. Women, men, children screamed. A blaze of red flame rent the air. Another. The wedding marquee fell, ballooning inwards like some great, dying sea beast. Danny drew back her arm, muscle tense, mind narrowed on the gunman and his shakier than a twig in an earthquake aim. The gunman twitched the weapon from the old man to the boy, then pointed it instead at the hissing, spitting Katt. Her entire being cinched. "Oh, no, 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 you don't." No one killed a cat in front of Danny Kareem. She flung the baton with every fiber of strength she possessed. It spun through the air as the pistol cracked. The cat! Hindquarters sponged, the cat sprung upwards a prodigious leap, claws extended, fangs bared, and attached itself to the gunman's thigh at the exact moment the spinning metal baton crunched into the side of his head. The man dropped as if his bones had leapt clean out of his body, leaving behind a fleshy sack. The pistol fell from his grasp, clanged down the paved walkway, and spun, coming to rest next to a potted miniature lemon. The child's jaw swung, though whether it was at the sudden appearance of a blonde-haired, copper-skinned Jairian in a sea of raven Tezraki heads, or the baton strike to the gunman's skull, Danny couldn't say. She moved at once, ready to offer a hand up to the old man. A click-click stopped her before she'd taken a second step. Another masked man emerged from behind a trellis on her left, pistol clutched in a white-knuckled grip. Its cold, dead eye glared directly at her head. "Time to die, metal-skinned bitch." Chapter 2. 2 days earlier. Danny Kareem strode towards an arbor covered in eye-watering crimson bougainvillea. The morning sun stung at her neck, hot and raw with the promise of a skin-blistering day. A fly buzzed her ear. She punched the insect to oblivion with a white-knuckled fist. The bastard had frisked her. Frisked her! Even after the 5-minute march across the compound, fury still burned on her cheeks. Reporting for duty at Izurum's regional command should have been easy. Standard Hafilu, Secret Service, protocol, outlined in precise and excruciating detail within the service manual. No space for ambiguity. She'd present her orders at the gatehouse, then hand over her knives, her dagger, her metal baton, and the bracelet on her wrist that doubled as a garrote. In return, the security detail would hand her a receipt. But to be frisked by a bull-necked local with over-friendly fingers? Not on today's agenda. Not on any day's agenda. Likewise, not on the agenda ever had been having her breasts groped, her butt grabbed, and her crotch fondled. The guard responsible had at least one cracked rib after her elbow had suddenly slipped, but it offered little consolation. Sooner or later, she'd have to return to the gatehouse and retrieve her weapons from Touchy-Feely, the guard. Maybe this time she'd crack his head. Aye, Creator, happy days. And today of all days, she didn't need the attention. Her gut tightened at what lay ahead. In response, her heart began to pound. She cycled through a well-worn mantra, drawing solace from a fast-dwindling supply. No emotion, no weakness, no retreat. Her destination loomed at the end of the arbor-sheltered walkway, a squat single-story blockhouse shaded by a wide veranda. The building boasted the same tired, complete-the-form and triplicate colonial architecture she'd encountered the length and breadth of Tizrak Yurda. Rows of louvered glass windows covered by insect screens, a lone entrance door likewise shuttered behind a screen. The stone and timber veranda posts, the terracotta tiles, and the potted geraniums, she'd seen it all before. Even the blowfly battering the door's wire screen like a tiny single-minded siege engine was nothing novel or new. Thump, thump, thump. She drew breath, inhaling dust, heat, pinyon, pine, and cinnamon. Her fingers brushed a communique in her pocket, brusque and short, commanding her presence at 9 bells. She squinted up at the sun. By her calculation, she was 10 minutes early. She forced her shoulders to relax, attempting to ease the tension in her neck. 412 days. An entire year in purgatory at the Empire's steaming arse end, pushing paper about a desk. Her sole opportunity to clear her name, and even then there were few guarantees. The general claimed this was the only option the service's brass would accept. She'd never quite believed him. A flick of a pen, a slight perceived by some faceless caste bureaucrat she'd never met, and any chance of rejoining the Tahafak, the Imperial assassins, would be gone forever. And Creator only knew in her life lowly Gastria caste, the child of a drunk and a money-laundering dockside bar owner, certainly had never been a friend. But what choice did she have? For the time being, she was an unranked Secret Service operative, a dirt-level, low-life pawn scum nothing. She pulled the screen door open and stepped into the building's cool. A foyer with the usual array of Imperial regalia greeted her. Behind a lone battleship of a mahogany desk, a thin-faced local adjutant stared back at her. Several years her junior, the adjutant wore a charcoal gray uniform and sported a scruffy goatee. Affixed to the wall behind him was a 2-meter-tall Jirian coat of arms, the Empire's sinuous gold dragon, and superimposed over its royal blue cedar, gloss enamel on polished brass. Elsewhere, a large wall clock, also enamel over polished brass, emitted an imperious tock, tock, tock. Alongside the Imperial arms predictably hung a pair of sepia portraits, one of the Emperor Safid, the other of Tizrak Yirda's current ruler, portly Prince Adomir. The prince beamed out at the world through his unruly two-tone beard, happy with his lot in life. The Emperor didn't smile. Safid Eldramor never did. His thin lips and weary gaze simply pressed down on Dani, damning her to her predicament. No use delaying. She snapped the papers from her pocket and offered them to the awaiting adjutant. Operative Kareem reporting for duty. I have an appointment with the regional controller at 9 bells. The sudden scowl on the adjutant's face read like a newspaper headline. A twist of the lip and a cool, 1,000-yard stare. She knew the look immediately, knew the familiar sting of guilt as well. Despite 200 years of famine-ending colonialization, the occasional piped sewer, and a standard currency, there were still Trazriki nationals who resented the Empire, and every Jirian homelander who'd ever drawn breath. Your appointment has been moved to 10 bells, Operative Kareem. The adjutant tapped his writing nib on an open register, a gesture equal parts go away, and I don't give a fuck. There's your name, second from the top, inked in at 10. The handwriting's mine. It took less than a moment to scan the man's precise calligraphy, perfectly straight, perfectly neat, perfectly smug, and decide they'd never be friends. It took another moment and a slow, calming breath to stop herself reaching out and squeezing his neck. The wall-top clock ticked out 3 seconds. She sucked on a cheek, let her fingers drift over the empty knife holster on her thigh. Had second, third, even 5th and 6th thoughts about what to do next. Perhaps this was an omen. It wasn't too late to leave. Not too late to flip both the Secret Service and Safid Eldramor's tired sepia stare a resounding middle finger. With her skills, work wouldn't be hard to find. Here on the continent, there were always someone willing to pay an assassin or a discreet, highly trained thief. Instead, her boots rooted themselves to the lifeless gray tiles. Call it duty, call it loyalty, call it stupidity. Even she wasn't cold enough to tear out the hearts of the only people who cared. She owed the general and his wife the blood in her veins, the breath in her lungs, her name, her honor, her fealty. To herself, she'd made a blood promise: clear your name of the heinous crime you didn't commit. The adjutant sat back in his chair waiting. His beady gaze flicked to the door and back once, twice, and again. Will there be anything else, Operative Kareem? Dani eyed the short, windowless hall that ended in the regional controller's closed door, hair on her still sweaty neck prickling. But what had she expected, really? Bethesel Shelamir had to know by now that her newest unranked operative was a disgraced former assassin. Pawn scum, indeed. As a matter of fact, there is something else, Adjutant. She searched the desk for a nameplate, found it half hidden by a newspaper, and a small brass statue of a Tazriki horse and snake hearth god she couldn't name. Tazrat something. How ironic. Named after a Tazriki folk hero famous for his continent-sized ego and outrageous red hat. Perhaps, Adjutant Zirat, you could explain why I wasn't informed of the change earlier. I only know what the regional controller told me, Zerat's too sharp chin and its fine black fluff jerked to the left. Clearly he wanted her gone. Seats in the corridor if you care to wait. Your partner's not here yet, though. Her partner. It took 2 full breaths and a clenched jaw just to keep the fury contained. She'd never needed a partner before. She didn't need one now. Another slap to the cheek. "I'll wait," she said. "Suit yourself." Zerat's lips flattened, unhappy with her decision. His rodent gaze flickered to the screen door and lingered before finally settling on the empty knife holster strapped to her thigh. He squirmed in his seat as if caught thieving, guilty tattooed in his narrow, shifting gaze. Danny glanced back at the screen door and beyond, but there was no one there. The blockhouse courtyard stood empty save for the trellised walkway and its garish crimson bougainvillea. She scowled at the bougainvillea. Everywhere Gerians went, it was always the bloody same. Bougainvillea, Imperial portraits, records, ledgers, and accounts. Oh, had she mentioned bougainvillea? A shrug, and she let it pass. Nothing she said or did would change a thing. She was a tooth on a tiny cog, an insignificant, nameless component in the great hulking gears comprising the brass, iron, and steel of the Imperium. A low-caste nobody. No living family, no home, the name she now used not even the one she'd been born with. With a final glare at Zerat named for a bloviating hat, she turned on her heel and took the first seat in the corridor. Resting her head against the wall, she closed her eyes. First battle completed. Let the year in purgatory begin.